to celebrate finishing my undergrad, I took one last peruse of my university's arts library, and I got out a few books. So the cover for this one is not spectacular, but this is the 1938 novel A Night of Serious Drinking by René Daumal. And also to celebrate, I bought myself a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from Argentina. Argentinian wines tend to be very good. I suppose a French wine would have worked better, but a lot of the reasonably affordable French wines at the LCBO are quite terrible. I like to go with wines from South America and Australian wines and Canadian wines when I'm in the mood. But anyway, A Night of Serious Drinking. This is unlike anything I have ever read before, but I loved it. I have notes here. I had to put together my thoughts on this book. I was actually taking notes as I read. And I guess the first thing I really need to do before I start talking about this book is read you the foreword, because the foreword frames the whole piece. So it says, foreword to be read before use. I refuse to accept that a clear thought can ever be inexpressible. Appearances, however, are against me, for just as there is a level of pain at which the body ceases to feel, because, should it become involved in its pain, should it groan but once, it would seemingly crumble and return to dust. And just as there is a peak at which pain takes to the air on its own wings, so there is a level of thought where words have no part to play. Words are made for a certain exactness of thought, as tears are for a certain degree of pain. What is least distinct cannot be named, what is clearest is unutterable, and yet things merely appear so. If human discourse is capable of expressing perfectly no more than a mean level of thought, it is because the mean of humankind thinks with this degree of intensity. It is to this level that it is sense. It is to this measure of exactness that it agrees. If we fail to make ourselves understood clearly, we should not blame the tools we use. Clear discourse presupposes three conditions: a speaker who knows what he wishes to say, a listener in a state of wakefulness, and a language common to both. But it is not enough for a language to be clear, in the way that an algebraic proposition is clear. It must also have a real, not simply a possible content. Before this happens, the participants must have, as a fourth element, a common experience of the thing which is spoken of. This common experience is the gold reserve which confers an exchange value on the currency, which words are. Without this reserve of shared experiences, all our pronouncements are checks drawn on insufficient funds. Algebra, in fact, is no more than a vast intellectual credit exercise, a counterfeiting operation, which is legitimate because it is acknowledged. Each individual knows that it has its object and meaning in something other than itself, namely arithmetic. But it is still not enough for language to have clarity in content, as when I say, that day it was raining, or 3 + 2 makes 5. It must also have a goal and an imperative. Otherwise, from language we descend to chatter, from chatter to babble, and from babble to confusion. In this confused state of languages, men, even though they have a common experience, have no language with which to exchange its fruits. Then, when this confusion grows intolerable, universal languages are invented, clear and hollow, where words are but counterfeit coins, no longer backed by the gold of authentic experience. Languages which allow us from childhood to swell our heads with false knowledge. Between the confusion of Babel and these sterile Esperantos, no choice is possible. It is these two forms of non-understanding, but more particularly the second, which I shall attempt to describe. So going into this novel, after reading this, I approached it on the basis that it would be about language. It would be an allegory about language, about knowledge. That still didn't help me much. This is the kind of novel where you are going to be utterly confused. It's French surrealism. So the novel opens with our narrator getting drunk. It doesn't matter to him what he's drinking, just as long as it's alcohol. The first page opens as, "It was late when we drank. We all thought it was high time to begin. What there had been before no one could remember. We just said it was already late. To inquire where each of us came from, at what precise point on the globe we were, or if it were really a globe, and in any case it was not the point, and what day of the month or what year was beyond our powers. You do not ask such questions when you are thirsty. When you are thirsty, you watch out for any opportunity to drink, and merely pretend to take an interest in other things, which is why it is so difficult afterwards to convey exactly what you experienced." So as I said, I approached this book on the basis that it was about language. And I interpreted that first passage as perhaps about language being invented, or language being realized, or a certain kind of discourse, a certain way of talking, certain kind of knowledge emerging. And so I thought at first, maybe I understand this book, maybe I've got it. And then it got stranger. So the narrator gets extremely drunk, to the point where he embarks on a bizarre journey into a strange and surreal world where things are even stranger than you could ever imagine. In this world, everyone at first is drunk. Everyone drinks. Everyone is constantly thirsty. Everyone is looking for alcohol. Those who do not drink are considered ill and sick. Those who are ill believe that they can somehow escape the reality they are in. Some of them believe that they have already escaped. There are scientists, poets, authors, artists, writers of all sorts, philosophers, politicians, and they are all seen as ill because they create things which are not useful, and they do not drink what everyone else drinks. They are creating for the sake of creating, and this is seen as irrational. They are seen as irrational, insane people. But even though this book is incredibly strange, it is also very, very funny. I don't think I got through a single page without laughing at either the characters or the way that the narrator is describing something, or just how satirical this work is. So as I said, this is considered a surrealist novel. The author is considered a surrealist. It's deeply satirical at the same time, but it's generally grouped within the surrealist school of writing. So I'm not actually too familiar with surrealist writing, so I did look it up to get a more precise definition. Surrealism is generally considered an artistic attempt to bridge together reality and the imagination. Surrealists seek to overcome the contradictions of the conscious and unconscious minds by creating unreal or bizarre stories full of juxtapositions. This is definitely a surreal, bizarre story full of juxtapositions. I further looked it up in this glossary of literary terms by M.H. Abrams and Jeffrey Galt Hartman. I had to buy this for a second-year mandatory British Lit class, and we never really used it all that much, but I found it useful today. So it says that the expressed aim of surrealism was a revolt against all restraints on free creativity, including logical reason, standard morality, social and artistic conventions and norms, and all control over the artistic process by forethought and intention. to ensure the unhampered operation of deep mind, which they regarded as the only source of valid knowledge. As well as art, surrealists turned to automatic writing, writing delivered over to the promptings of the unconscious mind and to exploiting the material of dreams, of states of mind between sleep and waking, and of natural or drug-induced hallucinations. Drug-induced hallucinations, right here. I'm going to be short. I loved this book. This is my kind of thing. When things start getting surreal, when a novel is almost beyond comprehension, when I have to start picking through passages to try to figure out what exactly the author was driving at, that's the kind of thing I like. Not only is this a work of surrealism, but as I said, it's also a work of satire. The author clings onto the worst aspects of human nature. He clings onto schools of knowledge, schools of thought, and really ridicules them. He name drops a little bit. He at the beginning of the book and throughout mentions the names of a few people. I didn't recognize them offhand, but out of curiosity, I Googled a couple of them. And some of them that he was mentioning were actually real people. He had these real people, real writers and philosophers and characters getting drunk in his book. So for instance, Sidonius appears early on. I searched his name and it matched the name of a 5th century poet, diplomat, and bishop. Alfred was a French symbolist and writer. I'm going to read one more section from this book to give you an idea of what the chapters themselves are like, the writing itself. So we have this guy, dead drunk. Everybody's completely drunk. They've been drinking wine, they've been drinking beer, they've been drinking whatever they can get their hands on. And everybody's talking nonsense, or it seems to be nonsense. You can make sense out of it, you can interpret it, whether that's the author's interpretation, or whether you're just making sense of nonsense. I don't know, find out for yourself, but page 8 and 9. Then the character behind the firewood showed the tip of one ear, then the tip of the other, then a nose, then a clean-shaven chin, then a beard, then a bald head, then a thatch of hair, for he was most changeable, a simple matter of prestigitation and instant makeup. It was said that without this masquerade, no one else would have noticed him, for they thought he looked exactly like everybody else. It may be that just then he was got up like a wool chopper or a tree. It may be that just then he was got up like a wood chopper or a tree, with a goatee and elephant eyes, but I wouldn't swear to it. Calmly he said something. Granite, gravel, gravel, granite, grey, garnet. A pause. Aconite, on the last syllable. I had already drunk enough for it to seem perfectly natural. The guitar exploded in Gonzagu's hands. One of the strings caught him on the upper lip. He allowed a few drops of blood to fall onto the back of his hand. Then he drained his glass. Then he jotted down in his notebook the rudiments of an extraordinary poem, which would be plagiarized the following day and betrayed in every language by 212 minor poets. From it sprang the same number of avant-garde artistic movements, 27 historic brawls, 3 political revolutions on a Mexican farm, 7 bloody wars on the Peloponnesus, a famine in Gibraltar, a volcano in Gabon, which had never been heard of before, a dictator in Monaco, and not quite lasting glory for the half-baked. It's a very entertaining read. If you like surrealism, if you're into something a little more on the unusual side, check this book out. I only ended up giving it 3 stars for the simple fact that at this point I am still not 100% sure what it was about, what the purpose of it was. If anybody's read this, if they have any insights into this book, please let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But until then, I hope everyone is having a lovely day and getting some reading done. And I'm just going to sit here and enjoy my glass of wine.